Hello, 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 and good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the July edition of Open Mic, Open Site, a program of the Collaborative Community. The Collaborative Community was born out of a vision to create a safe and empowering space for champions advancing digital opportunities in communities. Drawing from inspiration from the belief that art is not only healing, but profoundly transformative. This community exists to unite creators like our featured guests this evening and some of you watching today who long to make an impact. So we are glad that you are here with us tonight as we continue to explore the power of artistic expression. So, over the past months, we have had the privilege of exploring some powerful themes through the works of incredible artists. In April, we celebrated rebirth and renewal with visual artist Maribel Martinez and multidisciplinary artist Paul Branton of Branton Art. In May, we explored threads of connection through the theater work of Anita Lee Thomas and Cordero Johnson. June's theme of Echoes from the Past brought reflection and introspection from poet Aaron Larandos and visual artist Dr. Mariette Ayala. And now, here we are in July, and this month has gone by super fast. I don't know if y'all are feeling that, but it just feels like yesterday was the 4th of July. And now here we are at Open Mic, Open Site at the end of the month. But we are here in July with the theme Freedom in Expression, where we'll hear from two extraordinary artists who will share their creativity, their passion, and their truth. When I think personally around the theme of freedom in expression, I'm reminded of one of my faves, the words of the acclaimed poet and essayist Audre Lorde, who said, "Your silence will not protect you." Let me say that again for the people in the back. Your silence will not protect you. This powerful statement from Audre Lorde speaks to the courage that it is required to speak out, to express ourselves honestly and authentically, even in the face of adversity. We know that using your voice for the good of the people, the good of yourself, the good of your community can make you feel vulnerable. And sometimes you feel like you're out there by yourself alone. So being able to express yourself in this way certainly helps us to gain even more connectivity as people. Audrey reminded us that true freedom in expression comes from shedding the fear, shedding the judgment and the fear of judgment, and embracing the full power of our voices. And y'all are powerful. I know it. You know it. You may not know it, but I am here to affirm you today to say that your voice is powerful. So express it freely so that the world can hear more. So tonight, as we experience the works of the talented artists that are joining us today, we invite you to embrace that freedom, the courage to speak, the courage to create, the courage to share what moves you because it's important. Art in all of its forms has the power to open hearts, to challenge the status quo, and to bring about change. And tonight, we are going to honor that power in a beautiful way. So I thank you again for joining us for our July episode of Open Mic, Open Site. We are ready to begin tonight's showcase. I would like to bring to the virtual stage someone that I am a big fan of, not just because she is talented and one of the best design curriculum designers I've met in my time, but she has a beautiful heart and has jumped into this foray of becoming a published author. So let me read a bit of her bio. Monica Swope celebrates more than 20 years of expertise in education, administration, and curriculum development. She has flourished as an independent educational consultant and is the founder of Learning Dimensions, a Chicago based educational consulting company that aims to design and provide quality and transformative learning solutions and experiences to organizations that meet the demands of the 21st century learner. As an expert in her field, Monica is a published author of Everyday Daredevil. I have that book. Becoming a risk taker to achieve what you once believed was unimaginable. And that book and journal was published in 2020. It's an accessible guide to help readers to cultivate their risk-taking skills and to maximize their potential to push beyond themselves and dare to do something great. And she is now the author of 3 children's books: My Brave New Day, 3 Magic Keys to Growing Brave, and Brave and Bold, to help early readers to develop their bravery skills. And I think some of us adults may need to get into those books too so we can develop some of our bravery skills. I know I may need some of that from time to time. Monica Swope is a TEDx Pilsen woman speaker, has been inducted into the Marquis Who's Who's registry, included in the Marquis Who's Who's top professional series, and welcome to the roster of Marquis Who's Who humanitarians. During her spare time, Monica enjoys practicing and teaching yoga, going to live music and theater performances, binge watching stream programs, traveling, and trying new recipes. Let's welcome Monica Swope to the stage. Hi, Monica.
Hi, Kyla. It is such a pleasure to be with you and all of our listeners who are joining us on YouTube. First of all, I thank you for this platform, and I thank you for the opportunity to share my journey and share my story.
Awesome. Thank you. We look forward to hearing more from you today. So take it away, Monica.
Okay, thank you. So good to be in community. I want to share a little bit about my journey as being a creative, and focusing on freedom of expression. And I like to have as my running thread throughout this conversation is finding my muse. Okay, so my journey and finding my muse. Before we get started, I do dabble in a lot of different art forms. I want to start with this picture that I actually took. It was a self-portrait I did. Usually whenever I had some challenges in life, I would go to artistic and creative platforms to kind of help me edify myself, do a paradigm shift. And so one of the assignments was to do a self-portrait. And this self-portrait was roughly about maybe 13 years ago. And it was a time where I was going through this place of, it was a crossroads where I knew there was something more out there because I wasn't really satisfied with the state of fully satisfied with the state of life at that time. And so that looking out into the horizon and looking out into the unknown, I decided to use this picture of also for my book because it kind of talks about how I went from, having to cultivate these risk-taking skills to create that life that I once believed was unimaginable. We can go to the next slide. So as we think about freedom of expression, there's several words and sentences as I'm just playing around with different words. And that's what I think about when it comes to expression. And today I'm going to talk a little bit more about the art form of using the power of words and putting those together. So freedom of expression, to speak your mind, to voice your opinion, the right to be heard, unfettered speech, express yourself freely, and open dialogue, freedom of thought and speech, the power of the spoken word, an open platform for ideas, and then unrestricted communication. We can go to the next slide. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit more about me. I thank Kyla for such a wonderful synopsis with my biography, but I want to kind of personalize this conversation that I'm having with you. So, one, yes, definitely, I am an entrepreneur. If you see to the far left of my screen where it says "Off to my next journey," about nearly 13 years ago, I quit my job as a CPS district-wide administrator, and that was the last day. I had the box to the side. You might see it. I had my sign off to my next adventure, my next journey, and I was out the door. From that, Learning Dimensions is more than 10 years old now. And as a result, we were able to win a few awards. So you kind of see on one side, on the right side, me accepting an award. Then I was a small business champion with SCORE. That was exciting. Also had some opportunities, as you can kind of see, to do a lot of public speaking. One, the TEDx Pilsen Women, was able to speak in Croatia, so the international stage. And one of my favorite was being on WVON 1690 AM, and there's Perry Smalls there. And then I would say I'm also a serial entrepreneur. If you look at the bottom, there was a t-shirt venture. It was mostly a social entrepreneurship venture where me and my designer who designed the t-shirts, we came up with ways to demonstrate what learning means, powerful learning means. We put in a t-shirt form, sold it, and then donated those funds to projects and organizations that wanted to bring up impact in education. And then recently, my family and I, we started the Dorothy A. Swope Foundation, and two purposes for the foundation. One, to offer scholarships to scholars, and then two, to invest in projects that are going to really show a creative impact when it comes to learning. And then lastly, I am actually a master certified life coach, but I like to really add that piece in terms of becoming a certified professional life coach. Next slide, please. I also like to say that I stand on the shoulder of so many artistic inspirations, and those who are ancestors and currently in my life today. I would like to start to the left of my screen. That is my grandmother, Gussie Mae Leonard. Gussie Mae definitely is a creative. Her art form was mostly in textiles, dressmaking, dress design. Very, very talented into that field. She's also was very entrepreneurial. Actually had her own dress shop on the west side of Chicago. And then, of course, did some commissioned pieces. And then if you go to the right of the screen, that is my older sister, Felicia Clotworthy. She is such a creative in terms of, she really latched onto with my grandmother with this sewing and the seamstress. But my sister is very creative. Anything dealing with fabrics, yarns, colors, designs, aesthetics. Definitely a creative with fashion design, home decor. And she's also a very creative content creator. She's also a very good writer as well. And such a creative individual. I mean, it's just creativity seems to be in the DNA of our family. And then I want to give so much homage to our mother, Dorothy Swope. She recently became an ancestor, but my sister and I, we stand on the shoulders of this amazing, talented artist. And I want to kind of briefly just share, she has been our inspiration. My mom definitely did many years as an educator in the classroom, but also she was an artist, mostly in the visual arts, from painting, watercolors, oil painting, sculpture, mural design. And so she not only went to school with being a single parent, raising two girls, she continued school and she went for teaching, but also she went to minor in art at Northeastern Illinois University. And at that time, she didn't have a babysitter. And so I was a toddler, I was 3 years old, and I had to actually attend classes with her. And it was great that the professors allowed me to sit there because my mom needed to get her education, but did not have a babysitter. And my mom had her portfolio and she's doing her still life and her figure drawings. And I'm sitting pretty much beside her with my little satchel because I thought I was doing the same thing and I'm sketching things as a toddler. So those are my artistic inspirations. Next slide, please. So let's kind of go into the freedom of expression. And this time, I want to talk a little bit about how I use words to be my avenue for expression. So, and think about my theme of finding my muse. So I want to take you all the way back to me being a poet in the year 2012. And I always like to date, if you will, all of my poems. So I'm going to be very transparent, okay? My muse at the time. So when I was writing this poetry, a lot of the poems at the time are kind of like, grieving the loss of bad relationships, to keep it very, very, very real. I mean, those are my muse. So went into a relationship, okay, super exuberant about it, write some poetry about it, then it fails, and then it's like you're down in the dumps, and it's like, how do I kind of cope with the loss of that until the next cycle? Oh, and then there's the phase of like, you know what, I'm too good for you, poetry. So I have a little of that, and then to the next cycle of the ebbs and flows of love and relationship building. So it's interesting. I have some really powerful pieces. I'm not going to bore you with all of the very angry poems, if you will, but I do want to share a couple of poems during that time period as we go through finding the muse. The first one is called Poet. I'm going to do a quick reading of it, and this is kind of encapsulating me becoming, how I define myself as a poet at this time period. Emancipation of emotions, words, nourishment to the soul. Healing begins, sustained, self-exposed, recreated, regenerated. A poet is born. So this was just a very short riff. Pretty much took maybe a minute as I'm kind of defining who I am, but not only defining myself in this art form and how this art form is actually a healing process for me. We can go to the next slide. Now, this is one of my other poetry pieces during that 2012. This is December 23. And this is where I like to kind of show that, this is not only expression, but this is where language is very, like, this is where poetry is a place where heightened language exists. Okay, and basically I did some research in terms of how fires kind of, really consumes the things that is in front of it. And then I riffed on this. So I'm going to do a quick reading of this. So it's fireproof or love proof. I thought that I could be fireproof, immune to love, the intensifying temperature of desire, the intense feeling of deep affection that exceeds 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Those internal temperatures that makes that deep romantic attachment to another hard to be ignored. I thought I could never be burned, damaged by the highs and lows of love, or succumbed by vast temperature changes, resistant to harm, not able to be destroyed. I attempted to build up a not so passive protection to this fire. My goal, to become immune to the effects of love, its intensity and duration. My goal, protect my precious valuables. May they never be burned. Next slide, please. But then I met you and willingly threw myself in the fire, succumbed to the flames. I perished to the spectacular, indescribable, deep euphoric feeling for you. And in my passion, I was reborn. So that was one of my pieces. Honestly, I don't even know which fellow, because there was quite a few. I hate to say, but I don't know which fellow this was, and I want to say pretty much probably a month later they were out the door. Okay, and so I was writing the poetry like, you don't know how good you missed out on a good thing until the next episode. So at that time, a lot of my poetry at the time was kind of that muse, that is that like kind of reconciling with that kind of grief, if you will. Okay. And it's interesting, once that wasn't an issue, once I didn't have to worry about that, it's almost like I couldn't write poetry anymore. We can go to the next slide. So I had to get into some other type of writing. So I'll kind of briefly talk about this. I became an author of nonfiction, and this is a self-help book. This is Everyday Daredevil that was mentioned, and this was this is a different type of expression. In this case, my muse was being able to tell my readers of my journey of how I became this risk taker, how I kind of fearlessly leapt into the unknown, I like to say, how I talked a little bit about my business, how my business was a challenge at one point, but how I was able to cultivate these risk-taking skills and move beyond my fears. And so that I want to just show a couple of photos of that. If we can go to the next slide. And then I'll kind of just amplifying how do I really help my readers to move beyond this fear. And this is like an inspirational photo. Fear has two meanings: forget everything and run, or first face everything and rise. The choice is yours. We can go to the next slide. In the pages of a very short book, I help my readers to conquer those fears and to look at failure not as something that should be that they should shy away from. So I want to just read this quote taken from the book. I had to acknowledge that as long as I saw failure as an opportunity to see great potentials that can be found in the obstacles, I will be able to take hold of the great blessings that I did not know could actually exist. And here I have an image that I stand by: fail, first attempt in learning. If we can go to the next slide. So continue to have a wonderful run sharing that aspect of me in terms of self-help books, the guided journal, and communicating and using my writing for that purpose. Now, this year, actually in May, I decided to get out of my comfort zone and express my writing through the form of children's books. And this is where, once again, in terms of my muse, I went from angry, healing from angry relationships, definitely trying to further and tell my story about cultivating this risk-taking skills and really living this wonderful lifestyle that is, pushing beyond fears. And then I was going to talks and doing workshops with the book, and I want to bring these messages to a younger audience, and this is where the children's books come into place. The cool thing about it is this is the opportunity where words begin to play with pictures. I had a wonderful illustrator who helped me with this project by the name of Tracy Lewis. I actually returned back to the poetry because remember, I'm no longer angry at some men, okay? So I went back to the poetry, and it kind of just pretty much came because I wanted to bring rhyming words, really also to help early readers to begin to work on, a word recognition in their reading skills. So Tracy Lewis was great. She got the assignment, and based upon my poetry, she came up with some wonderful, wonderful like 3D graphics. And I really like the poignancy of these images. We can go to the next slide. So, actually, I'm sorry. Let's go back. My bad. Let's go back. So I have the 3 books. My Brave New Day. That's like the book number 1. 3 Magic Keys is the second book. It's based on one of the chapters in the book. My Brave New Day is based on the entire book, Everyday Daredevil. And the third book, Brave and Bold, is one of the chapters, kind of the action plan, but it's scaled down for the young ones. Okay, now the next slide. All right, so I want to read a little bit of My Brave New Day, and this is the first book. Once again, it covers many of the themes of the adult books. So I'm going to go ahead and read it into the right. I included some of Tracy's wonderful illustrations. On my brave new day, I might learn to skate, zooming so fast I'd feel simply great. I might build a rocket and zoom to the moon, or try out a tuba and play a bold tune. On my brave new day, I might make new friends or sing on a stage, draw a huge dragon or dance like a sage. I'd climb up a tree that's so tall and wide, then wave at the clouds as I sit up with pride. But sometimes I worry and I get kind of shy. What if I trip or what if I cry? Next slide, please. What if I mess up or do it all wrong? But then I remember that helps me grow strong. Someone dear to me once said, don't let fear say no. It's just a small voice that doesn't quite know. If fear's the big reason you don't want to try, then that is the reason to reach for the sky. So now when I'm scared, I take a deep breath. I whisper, be brave, and I take the next step. And when I stand tall with my heart shining bright, I sing my brave song in the warm spotlight. You can go to the next slide. So I want to thank you so much for going on this journey as you helped me go through the many phases of finding my muse and using the power of the written word as an opportunity to navigate that journey. And last slide, feel free if you would like to connect. Thank you so much for this platform. And Kyla, thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. First of all, thank you, Monica, for that incredible presentation. I've heard you speak on many occasions, but every time I hear you, I learn something new. And I'm so appreciative of this conversation around your new set of children's books. And instantly, when you were reading it, it reminded me of Dr. Seuss. And so I was like, oh, I can see the playfulness. I can see where a child would be attracted to this poetic language. And one of the things that I noticed in your storytelling is that you said that the poetry left you when you transformed and was healed in those moments, but that the poetry found you again when you needed to express yourself in this way for children.
Yes.
So talk to me about how or what it took to actually write this poetry and use a rhyming scheme, because that is sort of very challenging.
Yes, yes. So it was interesting because I knew it's interesting when it comes to writing and authoring books. It's almost like I'm a little hesitant. Like I still go through my own cultivate my risk taking skills. So I'm a little hesitant. I get very nervous and things like that. So I tried to do a children's book with not looking at like rhyming. I was trying to sit down. It just didn't seem to connect. But for some reason, doing poetry kind of was more natural. So I began to kind of just pick out in the adult book some of these themes and just begin to kind of sit down and play with words. And sometimes when I do poetry, and also I've taught some poetry sessions to students, I sometimes just throw words. And then I start threading, complimentary words. And then sometimes I started switching them around and I actually make it somewhat of a visual exercise. And that becomes like a brainstorming, if you will. Sometimes it's tactile, sometimes it's visual to begin to build out the books. So once I kind of got my flow, then, because it was like, it's almost like, getting back on the bike, right? And once I got my flow, the books pretty much came and they delivered. So that's kind of how that approach happened.
Amazing, amazing. The other thing that I loved that you referenced is this acronym for FAIL, First Attempt in Learning. And you are a former educator, current educator, consultant. Um, and we see that people spend so much time on the failure, so much so that it sometimes takes them out of their own game, even though they've had like incredible success in other areas. Maybe they tried something new or moved in a different direction, and maybe that didn't work out as planned. And then they spend a lot of time on the failure. Why do you think people spend so much time in the failure space versus what they say like failing forward?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think the big paralysis is the fear. Okay, so let's be honest. It's almost like one may want to make excuses for why they don't want to do why they may not do something. Okay, so dwelling in that place of failure and kind of licking your wounds kind of gives you those delayed opportunities to kind of push beyond those fears and actually move forward. So it's almost like that comfort zone, if you one could believe, like staying in that comfort zone, what is familiar versus taking the risk, taking the leap, pushing beyond those real fears or even imagined fears, and going into a place of unknown. Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of licking the wounds is familiar. Going beyond that, that's unknown. And that's just doggone scary. And it's scary for everyone. So even embarking on the children's book, trust me, it was scary. And I had to go in my book, go through my strategies so that I can push beyond those that setback.
Amazing and great advice and perspective. That lens I think is super helpful for those of us who may be watching this and thinking about their next step, and maybe it didn't go as planned, and are feeling fearful about trying again. So thank you for those tips. And your book, Everyday Daredevil, I still give that book out all the time because I think it gives such great insight and an action plan of how you like navigate the fear, because navigating the fear is an active practice. So you may be less fearful today, and then tomorrow you might be right back fearful about something. So that active practice and having that workbook to be able to refer to is really, really helpful. So y'all who are listening, y'all go out and get that book and get all of the children's books too. You may not have children, you may not have children in your home, but you may have children in your life, and they all need to read those books. And then the last thing I will share with you, and want you to share back about, is this family dynamic, your artistic inspirations being your grandmother, your sister, and your mother, and bringing that into the forefront of this moment, right? And so I know your family is super proud of you and all that you've done, but I think that that's super special that you sit your artistic space and pay homage to your artistic space with your family roots. I think that's beautiful and special.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, it's interesting when you are sitting in that space, you don't realize how just being in the environment of seeing my grandmother usually having some kind of fabric on the dining room table, a really nice dining room table, and she's cutting and the threads and things like that. And all of her grandchildren, for most part, knew how to do some aspect of sewing. I mean, even my great grandmother was a crochet, and then I have all of my aunts on my mother's side are very artistic, from cooking and pot ceramics to beauty estheticians, to decor, so it's almost like you just socialize. So you're just sitting there as children. And as I mentioned, my sister definitely sat beside my grandmother and was hand sewing clothes and wearing them at 11. And then grandma said, baby, I got to get you a sewing machine because you're wearing your hand sewn, clothes. And she, that's kind of how I saw her. And then, of course, my mom just, looking at, I believe for her, art was her creative outlet. It was a kind of a challenging time, when she was in those art classes, and she's in going on a new journey as being a newly single parent, a divorcee with two children, one that's 8, one that's 3, relocating to a new part of the city and trying to finish her studies. And life is life thing.
Yes.
So for her, really investing herself in that creative space, I think was healing for her. And so just kind of observing that. And, in some ways, I see my mom as a creative first, as an artist first, and then as an educator kind of second.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Thank you so much again, Monica, for being with us today. I really appreciate you sharing. And again, those who are watching Everyday Daredevil, the 3 set of the Brave books for children, please, please, please support Monica in this journey. And we are so grateful that you joined us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Whew, what an incredible presentation. Again, thank you to our author and poet, Monica Swope. So, as we move forward in tonight's showcase, I want to take a moment to share some exciting upcoming episodes of Open Mic Open Site. Remember, we meet here on the YouTube channel for the collaborative community every last Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we got some fantastic themes lined up for the next few months. In August, we'll explore nature's palette, diving into the beauty and the chaos and inspiration drawn from the natural world. Whether it's the serenity of a forest or the raw power of a storm, we'll celebrate the myriad of ways nature inspires creativity. In September, brings dreamscapes and fantasies, a journey into the surreal, whimsical, outer-worldly, where imagination knows no bounds. We'll explore how art can unlock alternative realities and transport us to places beyond our wildest dreams. And in October, we'll shine a light on shadows and light, an exploration of contrasts, dualities, and interplay of darkness and illumination. It's about finding beauty in the spaces where light and shadow meet. If you or someone you know would like to be featured on the upcoming episode of Open Mic Open Site, we really would love to hear from you. So send us a note through our website, collaborativecommunity.org, and we will be in touch with you soon. Now, let's continue with the rest of tonight's showcase and welcome our next amazing artist. Dr. Crystal Rawls is a higher education leader, systems strategist, and digital equity advocate committed to transforming how institutions recognize and invest in untapped talent. As director of the Workforce Integration Network at California State University, Dominicus Hills, she leads programs that reimagine education, work, and community impact through an equity first lens. Her scholarship and practice center on organizational behavior, identity development, and the power of agency in reshaping narratives and outcomes, particularly for historically marginalized communities. In this conversation, Dr. Rawls explores how embodied agency is essential to personal liberation and systems change. I really love that. Her talk, I Can't Draw a Straight Line, but I Am an Artist and I'm Sensitive About My Shit, woo, explores how program strategy is an art form and how bringing your whole self into institutional spaces is not only possible, but necessary. Now, that is a word for those who are in the academic space, right? Dr. Rawls challenges the false divide between logic and creativity, showing how identity, emotion, and vision all play a role in systems change. Welcome to the virtual stage, Dr. Crystal Rawls.
Hi, thank you for having me. Um, I thought it was especially important to be here because I can't draw at all. I have no like painting kind of talent. But when I think of collaborative, right, the art part of that, I very much saw the work that I was doing, the work that I do in community. And I put a little thought to that. And the words from Tech Nine, y'all, that's where that comes from, Tech Nine. I was having some fun with the title. Right? I'm an artist and I'm real sensitive about that. But what does sensitive mean? And
Mhm.
can we be sensitive? Can we be artists? If you can't paint, you can't draw. I might be able to sew, might I can cook, right? But when we think of artists, we think of this very creative and right, the starving artist mantra. And I'm here to put that all to bed because yeah, um, I'm not that sensitive actually. I'm task oriented and I'm strategic as hell.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that is an art. That
Art.
is an art form that we in our community in particular need to think about, right? So let me be clear. I don't call myself sensitive. I call myself strategic. It's a little bit of humor, a little bit of resistance, some truth, but really the title is more a nod to we can be more than one thing. We can define ourselves in a way that works well for us. Because when we can define ourselves, our experience, be it with painting or with children's books, or in my case with academic papers and program plans, we can show up. And that's where we do our most important work, right? So,
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you. That is part of the reason that I created the collaborative community. One, because uh, art is not subjective. It can be subjective, but it should be really objective. Like the boundaries of what is considered art, I think should and has been expanded. And we want to welcome all art forms here. So I appreciate, and I know one of the things that you do very artfully is logic models, and that is an art form. Because as creative as I am, those logic models be having me on the rope. My creativity kind of struggles in that space. So I'm gonna let you have the stage. Come as you are, Dr. Krista Rawls.
thank you. Thank you so much, Kyla. I love that you mentioned the logic models, y'all. So, right, when most people hear things like program strategy, they immediately think logic models. And logic model is I'm going to do this to get this because I want to eventually get that, right? What is the logical steps that you're going to take to do a thing? They also think KPIs, key performance indicators, and spreadsheets. And do not get me wrong, I love my spreadsheets. I do. To me, that by itself is an art form. I bring my full self to the work that I'm doing. And I turn like messy mandates and all these ideas into scalable change. I do it by staying rooted in who I am and not who systems expect me to be, right? So strategy, it's design work, it's architecture, it's improv, and it's deeply creative. And I just want to call in, when we think about our work and we think about the passion and purpose that comes with our work, that we call ourselves in as artists, as some in my community will say, stretch a dollar to make it holla. That is art. That is a cultural understanding that, sometimes when there is no way, you make a way. These are lessons taught to us by our ancestors, but they're also the very practical elements of program design, right? You check in with your strategy, you make sure that you're on time. If you're out of time or if your budget's not working, you go back to the drawing board and you see what you got to fix, right? These are cultural skills that are also very, very valuable workplace skills. Strategy is a creative process, it's a creative practice. So in my world, strategy is building structures where they don't exist. Programs, maybe not as beautiful as our artists. I'm going to shout out Mary Jane, Mary Art Music, Mary Jane, Mary Harris Originals, and right, some of our visual artists who create all of these beautiful images that even hang on my wall. But it's the programs that we put together when our departments say they don't have budgets, when our community still calls for need, where we put together soup kitchens or we put together rent parties. Our community has a wealth of strategy, and that is freedom being expressed in community. And when we gather that cultural wealth, we can do amazing things, right? So I want to correct a common misconception, right? Common assumption. I am task oriented. I'm not robotic. I can be detached, but I'm disciplined and I'm in it for the long haul. I can handle the problem, whatever the problem is, because we are conditioned for that in our society. And when I say we, I do specifically mean women of color. And it may be the experience of other women. I'm not speaking for all of y'all. I'm speaking for me as a woman of color who works in program design. This strategy, this sense of calling the community in and hearing those who are at the table. Some people will call that stakeholder management. I call it listening, right? I call it sitting at the knee of the elders in the community and then implementing what they said. Some people will call that strategy. I call that obedience to the community that I serve, right? So how do I actually build these things? So I went to a very typical standard assessment that our community tends to use. And when I say our community, I mean educators. We use strength finders, or the Gallup strength finders, right? So you can look that up, y'all, who want to look it up. And you answer a few questions and it'll give you like your top 5 strengths. And within those strengths are, in fact, some weaknesses, but we don't always talk about that. And we don't always talk about how our strengths help inform our strategy. So I'm going to do that for a moment, and I'm going to use the language of my field, academia, the words of my field, because this is my art. When I put together my programs, I'm thinking about who does it take to be on my team to complement my strengths, because in those strengths are also weaknesses. So I'm going to need some other people. So real quick flash here. My strengths are, I'm an activator, and that means I move fast. I do not wait for permission. I take turns but in motion. We got to keep it pushing, right? Input, that's a second strength. I collect language, tools, frameworks, information, data, libraries, you name it, right? And I use that all as input. And I am a learner. That's my third strength. I study patterns. I build fluency. I want to learn what you know, because you might know something I don't know, right? So I listen, I learn, and I am ready to move. If this doesn't work, done, move it. Let's keep going. Let's keep it pushing, right? Because if it's worth doing, I want to understand it from the front to the back. Again, this is strategy, but I hope you can hear and feel the art in purpose and in passion, right? This cultural wealth that I bring to the table, because there was a time when I was trying to figure out, do I pay my light bill or can I like pay half the gas bill? Well, today I do that through a $5 million grant, and I try to decide, am I going to pay this contractor or am I going to have more student internships? The skills aren't different, but who's telling the story and how do we respect the skills story? That's a conversation. That's the story. That's the art. We get to tell our truth in a way, in a community that helps strengthen all of our communities, right? So, my other, right, I got to three and then I started talking, right? But my other skills or strengths are ideation. So I will remix ideas. If I heard it here, I heard a little bit of it there. I learned so much from my daughters. They're all so different. And I just mix it all up. And voila, we have a new something because we put it together. And then my final strength, according to Gallup Strength Finders, is I am an achiever. I will get it done. Done, period. End of conversation, right? These are my strengths. And in those strengths, you might hear that I am a task oriented person. I want to get it done. I want to get it done fast. I'm not necessarily going to pause and worry about your feelings. Not my strength. So what I do is I use that information to build teams around me strategically, people who have empathy and compassion and understanding of others as higher in their strengths journey, right? It's different. It's not good or it's not bad. I do what I do and I do it, in my humble opinion, well. And I don't do it without those people who have strengths that I don't have, like my admin, my operations officer, those things that I'm not strong in, right? I pull that team together. That is an art form, building a team. And when we think about how we do that, yeah, sharing a bathroom with 4 or 5 people in the house, we can work this out. We can strategize. These skills, when you think about them through a lens of cultural wealth, what has my life experience taught me? Then you become a storyteller. You not only tell your story, but you can tell the story of your community. You can show the value of your community. So when I say I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit, my people, our journey, our path forward, our passion, our purpose, I take that very seriously. So when I put together my programs, I not only build on my strengths, but I build on yours too. So in my closing, your strategy, it doesn't really have to look like anyone else's. You don't have to fit into someone else's framework. You can build your own strategy and be taken seriously, especially when you deliver, right? So I'm going to put that plug in for my task orientated nature. Um, But when you put yourself out there, who yourself is, you get it all. You get the mom in me, you get the scholar in me, you get the person who fully believes that the way to do it is to get it done. But you also get the person who recognizes that I'm probably not the person you want in charge to console others, right? In that moment when people need consoling, right? I need my human resources people. So I build a stronger team by listening to and respecting not only my strengths, But where my strengths come with some weaknesses, there's nothing wrong with not being everything to everybody. But there is something wrong with not being able to acknowledge that we all play on a team together. And we learn that sometimes sharing the bathroom, sometimes paying the light bill, sometimes in school, right? So don't confuse the ability to draw a straight line from, say, your major to your career with success. You don't have to be able to draw a straight line. You just have to be able to tell your story and articulate how your experience of the world informs not only your strategy going forward, but informs how you uplift your community. So, those are my artistic words and thoughts that I'm going to share with you today. And now I'm going to pass it on back over to Kyla. And if there are any questions, I'm here for it.
Dr. Ross. So first of all, I didn't know I needed to have my yellow notepad over here next to me because you took us to school and dropped so many gems. And so I can't wait to be able to share back these gems back out into community, because I find this conversation about strategy being an art form fascinating. I think it is something that we don't talk enough about, which then brings me to my first question for you. So, if strategy is an art form, can it be taught? Should it be practiced? Or is it something that's divine, something that is just on you? You know, you have that instinct, that instinctual ability to find a pathway forward.
Um, I'm going to say both, right? It is nature and it is nurture. So here's some facts. If you throw some babies in water, some of them will swim, but some of them will drown. So let's not throw no babies in the water, y'all. Just for the disclaimer, let's not do that. But some things are instinctual for people. For me, hey, I'm the pivot princess. Like, let's go, whatever it takes. But that's for me. For other people, we have classes. Strategic management is a whole degree. You can learn it if you apply yourself and you practice it. And as our previous speaker said, you take those risks. And risk taking is not something that is born in us, it is nurtured by far, because when, systems say no and they imply a penalty to that no, well, then we don't take those risks. It's detrimental to our health, right? So what do? We have to then intentionally build in to our programs an opportunity to take risks safely so that our students can learn, that our learners can be free in thought and not be oppressed by those who would want to oppress us when we are ignorant.
Thank you for sharing that, and I totally agree with that. My next question is kind of a art alignment. So share a strategic decision that you've made recently that turned out beautifully, a visual painting hanging on a museum wall.
Okay, so you froze a tiny bit, so
Okay.
I didn't get the full question. So can you repeat that for me, please?
uh, Share a recent strategic decision that turned out beautifully in the way that one would admire a painting hanging on a museum wall.
Okay. Um, I love this. Thank you for that question. So, some of you may realize that there was a Digital Equity Act and that there was funding attached to that Digital Equity Act, and a lot of communities were relying on that funding. That's just the work, right? Our government funds social projects that improve the needs of our communities. Well, that funding went away one day. It actually went away May 9th as I was traveling home from Washington, D.C. And a lot of people in our community were like straight up hurt by that. right?
Mhm.
When you can take a moment like that and remind people that we are the reason for the season, so to speak, we are the movement, I was able to just kind of speak those words into my community and say, y'all, we're the ones who made this successful. The fact that they changed the money source is just what it is. So our entire community was able to come together, about 100 or 150 people, and affirm for ourselves that there was future digital opportunity in our space and in our county, because we're a community, we're a collective. I'm really proud of that, because it's the it's that cultural wealth that says, oh, can't go left, let's go right. Either way, we crossing that street when we come to it, right? And so to me, that celebration of community is worthy of being uplifted, upheld, painted, drawn, written poetry about. Unfortunately or fortunately, it will be written up in an academic journal. But are y'all gonna read that?
I'll write a poem about it. All right. Me and Monica, we'll get together and we'll bring that moment to life for sure. I love that. And the intentionality around that and the resilience building and training around that. And then my last question before we run out of time is last month, Dr. Ayala had shared a picture of her regurgitating poverty because she said she was tired of living in poverty as a young person and wanted to strive and find her way so that she could have a better life for herself. And you said at the top of your talk that when you live in poverty, you have to make these kind of decisions. I remember my grandmother getting one chicken and feeding 16 people. That was artistically empowering, like picking the way out of no way. What does trauma, poverty, or kind of those sad spaces do to help to build resilience and they show up artistically?
So sometimes they create people like me. I'm strategic, I'm organized, I'm going to do XYZ because I need to have a certain outcome at the end of the day. But it also makes space for people who are different.
Yes.
So if I guess what I'm trying to say is, even within my family, within my community, we're all different.
Mhm.
Um, Mariette talked about her art and her family, right? I could talk about my one daughter, who we call the gladiator, because girl's about her business
Mhm.
every day. Like, no, like, woo, right? And there's there's pride in that space, and there's humbleness in that space, but that means that there's space.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense. I hope
It
that answers
did. It
the
did. It
question.
did.
But there has to be space in this definition of art and strategy for everybody to come to the table and show up as their best selves.
I love that. Thank you, Dr. Rawls. I appreciate everything that you shared today. And again, if you are listening to this currently or in the future, get your notepads so that you can write down some of these jewels and take them back into your spaces and places. Thank you, Dr. Rawls, for your time today. I really do appreciate you. Wow. It's been an incredible evening of creativity and expression. Woo, my heart is so full. I love being in this space with these artists. I am just full, and I hope that you have taken something special away from tonight's episode as well. So, a huge thank you to our featured artists, Dr. Rawls and then Monica Swope, for sharing their work and energy with us tonight, and to everyone who tuned in to support them and to support me if you're here. You've all made this showcase something special. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you that art is a journey, one that we continue to explore together here on Open Mic, Open Site. So, whether you are a creator or a supporter, this space is for all of us to inspire, challenge, and uplift each other. As we move forward, we're excited to continue bringing fresh and diverse themes, and we can't wait to see you at our next event. So if you, or someone you know has a story to share or some art to display, don't hesitate to reach out to our website, collaborativecommunity.org. We would love to hear from you. Again, thank you again for being here tonight. Keep expressing yourselves. And remember, your voice, your art, and your truth matters. Freedom in expression. Good night, and see you next month on August 27th at 6 p.m.